Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Today, the special guest is attorney Daniel Meier from Durham, North Carolina. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a lawyer, been a lawyer here in Durham for about 22, 23 years. Prior to being a lawyer, I worked in healthcare. Decided the lawyers were having more fun, so I went to law school. Started off doing a lot of corporate and civil law, but then realized I enjoyed the courtroom work, and so I started my own firm and focus now primarily on criminal defense, mainly high-level robberies, rapes, murders, shootings. I'll do a little bit of everything, still do some civil, but mainly focus on the high-level cases.
Interesting. Are you from Texas?
No, I've lived all over. I've lived Alabama, New Mexico, Virginia, Tennessee, Texas, went to college at Notre Dame, went to grad school at the University of Alabama, and then went to law school at Carolina. So kind of moved all over. Texas is what I consider home, but kind of lived all over and have been here since '99. So this is probably as close to home as anything.
Yeah, same here. It's weird to think like more than half my life I've been living here, practically. So, okay, so you've had a little bit of time to look over the Markel case, right?
Yes, I have. And it's an interesting case that unfortunately you see sordid things like that in our job. So,
Yeah, and Daniel did tell me right before the show that there's been an emergency with one of his cases. So that's why he has to keep looking at his phone. So,
right, I'm just texting. I'm still focused totally on this, but there are a few
Oh,
little things I need to do so somebody who shouldn't spend the weekend in jail doesn't have to, but I'm
yeah.
good. But
Yeah,
yes, if I
there's
do have to look
also
at it, I appreciate the gap.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what I thought we'd do is to have you watch Daniel Rashbaum's opening in Charlie Adelson's trial, which
Okay.
was last fall, and we'll just stop every few minutes so you can just react to it. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. And Adelson is the brother of the ex-wife who was charged with helping set everything up, correct?
Well, she hasn't been charged, but it's the mother, Charlie's mother, who's in jail right now, and her trial is coming up in September.
Right.
So,
I knew the mother had been charged as she was trying to flee to a non-extradition country, of all things. But they haven't actually charged the ex-wife yet. That's a twist I didn't know. That's interesting. But
yeah,
we can go ahead.
yeah, it's been 10 years, and people are jumping up and down screaming, like, why hasn't the ex-wife been arrested? But I think she's probably needed to be a witness for the state because she has testified repeatedly with some sort of derivative and use immunity.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that makes sense. Did she testify against her brother?
yes, yeah, but she didn't really testify against him. Like she was still pretty dodgy.
But she
And
didn't exonerate. That would explain why they haven't charged her yet, then, as they're working on that.
that's what I'd like to think too. Yeah, that it's strategy. So, yeah. So this is Charlie's main attorney, Daniel Rashbaum. So
Okay.
let's go ahead and play that. Okay, hopefully you can hear it. Okay.
The state does not know what happened on July 18, 2014. On that day, 2 crimes occurred. The first one, the state knows about, and that was the brutal murder of Professor Markel. The other one, they don't know about. They're about to find out like you, because that day would forever change Charlie Adelson's life.
It is the morning of October 26, 2023, day 1 of the long-awaited murder for hire trial in the case of the state of Florida versus Charles Adelson. State Attorney Sarah Dugan just finished her opening statement, where she laid out all of the evidence she expects will come in at the trial. The evidence that will prove that the defendant is guilty of all charges. It is now the defense's turn. The defense could choose to waive opening until after the prosecution presents its case. But here, defense attorney Daniel Rashbaum announced that he was ready to give his opening statement for the defense. Daniel steps up to the lectern. This was a pivotal point in the trial. The jurors had just heard a long list of evidence that would seem to clearly prove Charles Adelson's involvement in the murder of his former brother-in-law. Those watching the trial were mostly already familiar with this evidence. For months, those interested in this high-profile case were wondering how would Daniel defend Charlie. Would Charlie deny any involvement? Would Charlie deny having paid for the hit with stapled money? What would Charlie say about the incriminating statements he made to convicted conspirator Catherine Magbanwa? The jurors must have been wondering too, what kind of response will the defense have to the seemingly overwhelming evidence discussed by the prosecution? The defense theory of the case was guarded like a state secret. In an effort to not tip prosecutors about what the defense would be, Daniel Rashbaum gave up several witnesses he had listed as defense witnesses, including Charles Adelson's parents. So here was the moment of truth, the moment when the defense would finally reveal the defense strategy. Prosecutors suspected that Daniel Rashbaum had something up his sleeve, and he did. During opening statements, Dan Rashbaum announced that there were 2 crimes committed on July 18, 2014, not just the murder of Dan Markel. He at first withheld any details, saying that he likes cliffhangers, and then later in his delivery, he dropped the bomb. Let's watch it together.
My name is Dan Rashbaum, and with me is Kate Myers, and we represent Charlie Adelson. Now let me start by saying the obvious. The murder of Professor Markel was a tragedy. The world lost a brilliant legal mind. His family lost a son and a brother. This community lost its sense of security and lost a good citizen. And his 2 boys, the nephews of Charlie Adelson, lost a loving father. His senseless murder continues to be felt throughout this community and others. It was inexcusable, despicable, evil. But what I'm going to tell you today is what actually happened. You will see that Charlie Adelson had nothing to do with the murder of Professor Markel. You will see that the state cannot come close to meeting its burden. Why? Because Charlie Adelson is innocent. Now, I don't have to prove innocence. But what I'm telling you, I very rarely say in a courtroom as a defense lawyer. Charlie Adelson is innocent. And we'll get there. But the next thing I'm going to tell you, I also rarely say in a courtroom. And you may be surprised to hear this from a defense lawyer. I have great respect for the prosecutors and law enforcement on this case. I have admiration for their efforts after the murder of Professor Markel in trying to find out who did it. You will see that they spent countless man hours, cell phone tower dumps, surveillance videos from a boatload of places, buses, cameras on the street. Great law enforcement activity. And it paid off. They got the 3 killers. They convicted them. Sigfredo Garcia, convicted for life. Luis Rivera, Catherine Magbanua, convicted for life. The problem is, as you just heard, the state saw no connection between these people and Professor Markel. So from the very outset, the state suspected the Adelsons, the family. You saw the chart. It wasn't limited to Charlie Adelson. Unindicted co-conspirators in this case, the state has said it, Wendy Adelson, Donna Adelson, Harvey Adelson. The state knew, as you heard, that Wendy Adelson and Professor Markel had gone through a brutal divorce. You're going to see it. But they couldn't find the connection. But then they had their aha moment. As you heard, they determined that at the time of the murder in 2014, Charlie Adelson was dating Catherine Magbanua. And they learned that Catherine Magbanua had a previous relationship, on again, off again, with Sigfredo Garcia. They learned that Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua shared 2 children together. They had their connection.
Okay. Daniel, what do you think? I'm kind of getting frustrated because Rashbaum seems to be speaking so slowly. It's like, come on, speed it up. You know,
Yeah, I mean, he was right. It is interesting on the theory, do you give an opening or don't you? He hasn't hit the bombshell yet. I guess we'll find that. Because a lot of times you don't want to give away your secrets before the state starts putting on their evidence. But yeah, he's kind of walking slowly, and it is interesting for him to say he is innocent. He is this, he is, you know, he didn't do this. Because you really put yourself out on a limb. One thing that we repeatedly tell clients and everyone else is trials are not about innocence. They're about guilty beyond a reasonable doubt or not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I think I've seen a handful of the comments come by where people have said that kind of hurts credibility. And I think him kind of walking through and being so adamant of, I'm not asking you to say there's reasonable doubt. I'm asking you to find innocence. He's walking himself out on a ledge there, which isn't necessarily the best way to go about things. You know, our clients always want us to believe in them, but as we tell them, our job's not to prove your innocence. But it is going to be interesting to see how he walks himself through it as well, because I mean, I haven't seen, obviously we'll see more of it as we go along, but he's trying to say, well, they were looking for a connection. Well, I mean, of course, if someone is murdered, you're looking for a connection to why might they have been murdered. And, you know, that's why they trace it back. So it is interesting. I mean, he is kind of walking them through it. Some attorneys tend to go very deliberate and slow in their openings, but he's walking himself out on some ledges that you need to be careful in an opening, because if you make promises you can't prove, the jury will remember it, and the prosecution will certainly remember it and point it back out. And that's why our clients and everyone else would love us to say they're innocent, they didn't do this. We usually don't go that extreme in an opening. You might in a closing, but in an opening, you don't want to make promises that if they then start having, they need to focus on the state's case. The state has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. My client doesn't have to be innocent to be not guilty. And he's actually creating a much higher bar for himself on the defense side than he really needs to.
Great comments. So you don't usually start your openings that way, by declaring innocence?
No, I don't. I'm a little bit different than a lot of attorneys. I don't tend to do a lot of openings. I know some people say they're the most important part. There's that. But when I do them, I try to be fairly vague, because unless it's very obvious where I'm going, I don't need to clue the prosecution in, because then they start tailoring their witnesses to attack my defense. And to say something as far as innocence, we spend the entire jury selection saying the state has the burden beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't let the state say innocent. We try not to say innocent. I mean, obviously our clients would always love it, but that's not how it works in court. And I don't want them to say, you know, I'm not sure what happened, but he certainly isn't innocent. It can shift the burden. And the burden is on the state to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't want them to think my client's innocent. I want them to think the state didn't do their job. It's not my job to prove anything. And so I would not say innocence, he was innocent, because then it sounds like, well, if he can't convince me he's innocent, then the state wins. No, the state has to prove the guilt. So that's an odd way to start.
Yeah, great point. I never thought about it that way. Okay, great. Okay, shall we continue? Okay.
Yeah.
The problem is, that's where the state began to guess, began to make assumptions. And you will see, we will show it, that those assumptions didn't make sense. Now, I love jigsaw puzzles. I've loved them since I'm young. The reason why I love them is because they only work if every piece fits. No matter what you do with the jigsaw puzzle, if a piece doesn't fit, it becomes a mess. You can't hammer it, and you can't ignore it. Because if you ignore it, you have holes in the puzzle. What you're going to see is, with regards to this case, that's exactly what the state tried to do. They heard things, they saw things, but there were problems. They couldn't fit all the pieces together under their theories that they told you about today. I'm going to show you how those puzzles, those pieces, they didn't fit. They don't fit. And why? Respectfully, the state does not know what happened on July 18, 2014. On that day, 2 crimes occurred. The first one, the state knows about. and that was the brutal murder of Professor Markell. The other one, they don't know about. They're about to find out like you. Because that day would forever change Charlie Adelson's life. But before we get there, I like cliffhangers. It's important to give you some background and timeline of the events. Charlie Adelson is 46 years old, single with a young son. He grew up in South Florida, in Coral Springs in Broward County. His father was a dentist, a local dentist. It wasn't the Adelson Institute when Charlie was growing up. It was a small dental practice with his dad. Charlie is the middle child of 3. He is very close with his parents. As they said, he is very close with his mom. Growing up, the family was middle class. And Charlie was not particularly close with either of his siblings. He grew closer with Wendy as they got older. He went to college at the University of Central Florida, went to dental school in South Florida, and then periodontic school. When he graduated as a periodontist, he had an idea. For work in his own practice, he figured that he could travel around to dental practices all over South Florida. He would be a traveling periodontist. So what you are going to learn in this case is that Charlie Adelson had practices from the very south of South Florida to as far places as Jupiter. He's in the car sometimes for hours in a day. And he worked a lot. You're going to see that. He was a workaholic. He spent a lot of time in that car. And what did he do when he was in the car to pass the time? He spoke a lot on the phone.
Okay, next time I'll speed it up a little because this is going like molasses. Right. So what do you think now?
I mean, it's still, obviously, I don't know all of the state's evidence to look at, but clearly it's a murder for hire. The state has already gone first and explained that. And you have to, one of the things in openings and why you want to keep them slow, like when he says, I love cliffhangers, trials aren't TV. They're not cliffhangers. You want to tell the jury the punchline so they know what to be on the lookout for. And already looking at this, okay, so he was a periodontist who went along everywhere and talked on the phone. So is he going to try to say he just randomly happened to call the woman who set up the killing of his sister's ex-husband because he's a periodontist who likes to talk on the phone? I mean, you don't want to create questions with your opening. You want to answer questions and you want to show what I'm going to tie in. And without having seen all of it yet, he's already creating more questions, even in my mind. Now the jury's going to be saying, wait, is this really where he's going with this? You know, he just happened to know the woman who happened to know the people who killed
the shooter.
It's also interesting, and they must have litigated it ahead of time. Normally, you can't talk about what happened with co-defendants in trial. So the fact that he said these people were convicted and these people were convicted and these people were convicted isn't normally something that's discussed because you don't want that whole guilt by association. So I don't know. The defense must have agreed to allow that in because that's just not normally something you do. So like if if two people are on trial and person A was convicted, in person B's trial, they're not allowed to say, well, you know, person A was convicted, so you should convict too. So that's kind of interesting to me. And I don't know if that's a quirk of Florida law or they had worked something out, but the outcome of co-defendants' trials is not really relevant to your guilt or innocence. You know, that was a completely different jury. So you can only do that, like, if they testify, you can bring it up and say, well, weren't you convicted in this, or weren't you offered a plea? But to bring it up like that is very interesting to me.
Okay. Well, I mean, just watching this again, it is kind of weird that he says there were two crimes that happened that day, and then he doesn't tell the jury like what it is. So if I'm on the jury, I'd be like, what? You know, suddenly you're telling us there's some big, you know, other crime that happened that day, but he doesn't tell you, and then he starts humanizing Charlie.
Yeah, and that's what I was curious about is, are we going to get to that other crime? Because never make a promise in opening you can't get to. And this whole humanizing of here's how he grew up and things like that, that's your closing. That's what you go into. That's not, I mean, because the jury, you're not winning any points with them. They want to know in your opening, what are the state's weaknesses? What are the state's issues? What should I focus on? Not, hey, pay attention to my client. He's a real nice guy. That's not how this works. So it's a weird, his opening is kind of a hybrid with a closing of trying to humanize things and bring stuff up. And I don't think that works. I mean, you want to keep your openings as short as you can, just to basically get the jury to focus on A, B, and C, not to like your client. They're not going to like your client. Your client's the defendant. Get them to like your client and explain later on why. Don't try to explain your client before you can put on evidence. It's not going to work.
Okay. Okay. Should I go ahead and play it faster?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Maybe 1.5.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
He would talk to whoever would listen to him. And you're going to see in this case, this is one thing we won't deny, Charlie Adelson likes to talk. And he likes to repeat himself. And who would he speak with the most? He'd speak with his girlfriend. He'd speak with his mom. He'd speak with his friends. Now, Wendy Adelson, who's a state witness, followed a different path. She went to a prestigious university in Boston. She then went to school in England on a Truman Fellowship. And later...
Oh, why aren't they texting me back? Are they mad at me? Do they not like me anymore? I'm scared to ask for reassurance.
Went to law school. She got scholarships for law school and college. Soon after starting law school, she met Dan Markel, and they fell in love. They got married. They ultimately moved to Tallahassee, where they both worked for FSU. Professor Markel as a law professor of the law school. Charlie Adelson didn't have much to do with either Professor Markel or Wendy during their marriage or before their marriage. He would talk to his sister periodically, maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks. They lived in Tallahassee for years. Charlie Adelson visited him in Tallahassee 2, maybe 3 times. Charlie loved his sister. He sought advice from her, as she did with him every once in a while. But they weren't super close. They were brother-sister. The truth is that Charlie Adelson was a little self-centered. He was building his career. See, that traveling periodontist, in the beginning, it wasn't that successful. But by the time of this case, in the 2013-2014 time period, you're going to see that Charlie Adelson was making a lot of money. His practice was booming. He was working 6, sometimes 7 days a week. You'll see it on the wires. You'll see it in text messages. He would start his day early in the morning, and most days he wouldn't get home till 8, 9, 10 at night. At the time when this murder occurred, he was not married. He had no kids. He had a lot of money. And he was living a very good life. Now, in 2012, Wendy Adelson, on a trip down to South Florida, confides in her brother that she was having problems in her marriage. She told Charlie that she and Professor Markel had been going through marriage counseling. She asked him what he thought. He said, look, I want you to be happy, but you have to do what's best for you. I'm here to listen. Charlie had no involvement whatsoever in Wendy's decision to divorce Professor Markel. You'll hear that. And in September of 2012, Wendy filed for divorce. And you're going to hear about how she filed for the divorce, and you're going to learn that Charlie had no involvement in her leaving the house. Had nothing to do with him. But we got to talk about TVs. And you're going to hear a lot about TVs in this case. Excuse me. See, Charlie has a really bad history of telling bad jokes. So when Wendy left the house, his mom told him that she didn't have a TV. He asked her, he said, what can I do to help Wendy? She's moved to a new place. She's left most of the stuff behind. What can I do to help? His mom said, she doesn't have a TV. He said, okay, when you go to Tallahassee, go to Best Buy, buy a TV for Wendy, and I'll pay you for it. And so Wendy got the TV, and she called Charlie. This is back in 2012. The murder's in 2014. And she thanked him for the TV, and he didn't say he looked into hiring a hitman. He joked, a bad joke, and he said it was cheaper than hiring a hitman. Now, not only was it a bad joke, but you're going to hear in this trial, Charlie repeated the joke. He repeated it a lot to a lot of people. You're going to hear that he repeated it as late as March of 2014. So the man that they think hired a hitman is joking to others about hiring a hitman. Puzzle pieces. And you're going to learn why his repeating of that joke is going to be so important. I'm going to tell you in a little bit. Keep in the back of your mind. But let's first go back to the divorce. The divorce was bitter. It was emotional. Wendy Adelson and Professor Markel, they'd have good times. But when things were bad, they would fight about everything. And in January 2013, Wendy Adelson filed a motion to relocate to South Florida with her two boys. That motion was opposed by Professor Markel. Now, what you're going to learn in this trial is that Wendy Adelson never thought that motion would be granted. Her lawyer told her that motion would never be granted. But she said, let's give it a shot. Charlie had very little to do with the motion. He knew she was filing it. He knew she didn't have much chance of getting it. And the motion was denied. And when it was denied, it didn't change Charlie Adelson's life one bit. But unlike Charlie, his mom and dad were upset. They were upset because their daughter had a job opportunity in South Florida. She had no family support in Tallahassee, and they wanted her home. And you will see that Don and Harvey Adelson are very involved in their children's lives. We won't run away from that. You will see that Donna Adelson and Harvey came up with a lot of crazy ideas. I mean, crazy ideas. You're going to see them. You've heard about some of them. When they show you those crazy ideas, take a look if any of them includes murder. Doesn't. Take a look at any of those crazy ideas include anything illegal. It doesn't. Take a look at if they're actually then go to lawyers to make sure that their ideas are legal. Murderers. You heard it. Unindicted co-conspirators going to lawyers to make sure that what they're offering is allowed. You're going to see that. But the ideas were crazy. You're going to read the emails, a lot of emotion. A mother-in-law, a grandmother with a lot of emotion. And you're going to see that Wendy Adelson, she rejected them. She rejected the ideas. They were never presented to Dan Markel. And then you're going to see that there was another idea. They mentioned it in their opening, but they don't understand the importance of it. See, at one point in time, Donna Adelson and Harvey Adelson came with an idea to pay Professor Markel $1 million to allow their daughter to relocate. And they went to Charlie, who frankly by this point in time had more money than them. And they said, will you lend your sister $350,000? She'll pay you back or we'll pay you back. And he said, sure. And you're going to see that they presented this idea to Wendy Adelson. And the idea wasn't to take the boys out of Professor Markel's life. The idea was that with $1 million, if Professor Markel agreed, he could live in South Florida and commute back and forth to Tallahassee. He could work out his schedule. He didn't teach every day of the week. He could work out his schedule so that he could still teach at the university and go back and forth. You're going to see that Wendy Adelson never made that offer. But it's very important. Like the joke, I want you to put it in your back of your mind for now. Let's fast forward to October 2013. October 2013, Charlie started dating Catherine Magbanwell. We'll call her Katie. She was beautiful. She was smart. Like Charlie, she graduated from UCF. She was hardworking. He met her in one of the dental practices. At first, the relationship was casual. They wanted it that way. Charlie particularly liked it and liked Katie because she had 2 children. He worked a lot. His priority was his job. And Katie didn't bother him a lot. He only saw her like once, maybe twice a week. That's what he liked. She was smart. She was fun. And he treated her very well. And that was very different, you'll learn, from how she was treated previously. Now, you'll hear that he spent a lot of time with Katie over the months that they dated. And remember how I told you Charlie talks a lot and repeats himself a lot? Well, when they were together, he did just that. He talked about his day. He talked about what was going on in the world. He talked about his family, which, by the way, was a constant topic every single day. Because when Charlie's driving in the car every morning for an hour to work and an hour home, sometimes longer, he talked to his mom on the phone. And when he talked to his mom on the phone, what would be a topic of heavy conversation quite frequently? Wendy's divorce. All the problems in the divorce. They told you that.
A few things looking at this. Again, you don't want to create questions in your opening. First of all, people don't joke about hiring hitmen. Juries don't appreciate it. You know, that's not funny. And without seeing what his punchline is, he seems to be trying to convince the jury that he complained to his girlfriend about his sister's divorce enough that his girlfriend just said, you know what, on my own, without any involvement from you, without any of your money. And of course, the lawyer has now said he's got plenty of money to spend. He can loan $1 million here, $1 million there. The girlfriend took it upon herself to do this. Again, an opening statement should answer questions, not create questions, or it should raise doubt in the prosecution's case. Just having watched this, not seeing the prosecutors, he is opening way more questions. I mean, just knowing it's a murder for hire, and he's already said his girlfriend was implicated and convicted of it. He's creating a lot of scenarios that just aren't plausible and that the jury is going to already immediately start doubting, at least in my mind. And that's not the way you want to do it. I mean, you know, this is the kind of case you would want to keep it as low as possible. And if they kept bringing up he did the hitman, then you say later, or you ask on cross, well, he's just joking, right? He's now told the prosecution his entire case is the guy likes to joke about hiring hitmen being cheaper than TVs. So I guarantee you on direct, the prosecution is going to ask every one of their witnesses, have you ever known someone to joke about hiring hitmen? He's telegraphing way too much, and he's opening up way too many questions that just don't, you know, you don't want those questions up front. A, you're giving the prosecution a chance to answer them. B, like I said, just watching this, I mean, you're already thinking, wait, so he complained so much to his girlfriend about his ex-wife's divorce. His ex-wife said, you know what, if I just kill the husband, I can be with my man. I mean, without his knowledge. I mean,
wait, you mean the girlfriend?
yeah, the girlfriend. He's telling, because the state just said he loved to complain, talk to his mother a lot when he drove around, because he likes to talk and repeat himself.
Yeah,
and it
he
was
on
constantly
wiretaps.
about, right. And it was constantly about his sister's divorce and custody. And so I'm assuming where he's getting ready to go with this is then he would talk with his girlfriend a lot about his sister's divorce and custody. And I guess his girlfriend got sick enough of it. She said, I will just eliminate this custody issue so he will
I'll
talk
do it
about
for you.
something else. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like I said, just he's creating way more questions than you want to create in an opening statement. An opening
Yeah.
statement is supposed to narrow the jury and have them look at things. And he's already giving a story that the jury's going to be skeptical of.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't know how much you've read, but I think the punchline is surprise. Charlie is the victim of extortion because evil Katie turned around and told him that she had run her mouth to her baby daddy, Sigfredo, and the Latin kings, and she would need, what did she say she needed? Like she needed 300 something $1,000 from him, or else the Latin kings were going to come after him and his family. Yeah. So he paid her because he was being extorted. It wasn't for the murder. So
right. And I had seen, yeah, and I had seen some of that. And that extortion only works if the murder had already happened and they were and he was responsible for it and they were buying their silence. Yeah, I know that's the problem with promising innocence. You need a plausible argument, and his argument just isn't credible. I mean, juries don't, criminal defense attorneys and people involved in the system know we deal with a lot of stuff and we hear a lot of jokes and do a lot of things that people just don't. Juries don't. They don't joke about killing people. You don't date somebody who's got a baby daddy who's in the Latin Kings who is suddenly now going to say, oh, I'm going to kill your sister's ex-husband unless you give me lots of money. And then if I do it, you're still going to have to give me lots of money. I mean, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
That's
well,
not
his
even
theory.
TV.
Yeah, his theory was that evil Katie and her baby daddy and the baby daddy's friend decided to just go ahead and kill Dan and then threaten Charlie with extortion, that he could be killed unless he gave them money, and he supposedly didn't have all the cash in his safe. So they agreed to put him on a payment plan. So that's why he was still giving Katie money months and months after the murder.
Yeah, so, and that's where it that sounds like the novel, but I say this as representing a lot of people. Killing people is not easy. People don't like to kill. If they were going to do that, they would have just said, we're going to say you hired us to kill. The fact they went out and killed is because they wanted something from it. You don't blackmail somebody by killing somebody, putting yourself on the line for murder, and then saying blackmail, hey, we're going down for murder, but if you don't pay us, we're going to bring you in too. It would have been much easier and much smarter. And if they were smart enough to blackmail over this stuff, to just say, we're going to say you hired us to kill her. And unless you give us money, we're going to the police and showing them all this evidence without actually doing the killing. Because there's a huge difference between this dude tried to hire me to kill somebody and I killed this person because this person hired me. If you kill them, you're going to prison for the rest of your life anyway. So, you've kind of given up your leverage.
Yeah, but Do you have any, do you feel sorry for poor Rashbaum? Because he has a tough job. Somebody has to defend Charlie. So,
I mean,
I mean,
do I feel for him? I mean, we all have clients we have to defend, and our job is not to defend the client. It's to hold the state to their burden, you know, and you can do your same job by saying the state didn't prove their case. I don't feel sorry for him because he walked himself out on a limb by saying, my client's innocent. My client did this. My client did that. You can zealously defend your client while focusing just on the state's case, just focusing on the holes. He has personalized this and is trying to do that. I mean, it is our job. It is what defense lawyers have to do, but you can defend your client's rights and defend your client without trying to justify your client's actions. And I think he's kind of crossing that line. I mean, when I have clients who are accused of shooting somebody or accused of murdering somebody, I'm not trying to explain why they may have shot or murdered that person, unless it's self-defense and things like that. I'm trying to say, look, the state has one eyewitness who wears contacts. It was raining. They were 150 feet away. You know, there's ways to defend your case without pretending your client is something he's not. And it's the false promises he's creating. The problem isn't defending your client. He could have accomplished a lot of this without making these definitive statements that he now has to prove. My client's innocent. My client was being set up. No, you say, you know, the state can't prove my client did this. You know, we have evidence, you know, there's possible evidence that his girlfriend or whatever she is conspired with her baby daddy to come after him without making it definitive. He's creating a narrative and a story that he now has to own. That's why you've got to be very careful in openings. In closing, you can wrap it all up. You can be definitive. You can fight. You can argue. You can do whatever you want. But in openings, you better be able to deliver on what you're saying. And if you can't deliver on what you're saying and you can't tie it together, then the prosecution or the other side, because we do it to the prosecutors all the time too, because they love to overpromise, can always come in and say, remember when they said this and they couldn't do it? They obviously heard the evidence and they realized that they didn't have anything either. So, I mean, I feel for him defending his client, but that still doesn't mean you walk yourself out on a limb and make a bunch of promises that you just can't handle and you just can't keep. I mean, you've still got to know your case and you've got to know what you're doing.
Okay. People are saying they appreciate you being here. So thank you.
Oh, anytime. I appreciate it.
Referencing the My Cousin Vinny defense. Okay.
That is, if you want to watch a legal movie that even though it has a lot of oddities, but is actually true to how courtroom practice is, other than the fact everything takes place in a day or two, My Cousin Vinny is perfect for that. It actually gets into discovery and everything else. I love that.
Okay. Do you want me to speed it up more?
Yeah, because unfortunately, and maybe I'll need to come back another time. Unfortunately, I have to run in a little bit, but.
Oh, okay. So how much longer?
I've only got about another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's listen to this.
Get him to the punchline.
Huh?
Get him to his punchline. I want to hear his punchline.
I don't know where exactly the punchline is, but let me just fast forward a little bit and do it.
And get the YouTube ad.
Emergency, call a cell phone number, take your call home on a cell phone number. What he hears, an emergency, call Dr. Adelson at such and such number. He thinks he's calling Charlie Adelson, but he calls Harvey Adelson. And he calls him and he threatens him. He tells him, if you keep dating Katie, we're going to go mano y mano. I'm going to kill you. 17 days before, according to them, he conspired with this man to kill Professor Markell. What you're going to learn is that in the spring of 2014, it became apparent to Katie that her dreams of financial security with Charlie were not going to work out. You will learn that Katie heard the hitman joke. You will learn that she heard the $1 million offer and she got some ideas in her head. The state itself has called Catherine Magbanua the mastermind. And that's exactly what she was. So now let's get to July 18th. I kept you waiting long enough. The June attempt didn't happen because Rivera didn't want to kill Dan Markel when his boys were around. See, what you're going to learn is during that June attempt, on June 4th, 5th, Professor Markel had custody of the boys. You're going to learn that Professor Markel and Wendy Adelson shared custody 50-50. You're going to learn that the state thinks Wendy Adelson was involved with her brother in a murder for hire, and she chose for the killers to kill her ex-husband when he had custody of her kids. Puzzle pieces. So you're going to learn that Luis Rivera, who is a bad guy, he had some conscience somewhere. He didn't want to do it in front of the kids. So they came back. By the way, on July 18th, who had custody of the kids when the murder actually happened? Professor Markel. You're going to hear he dropped them off at school. But this family who did this so that their grandchildren could be with them were going to risk for 2 hired hitmen to go up when he had custody of the kids. Puzzle pieces. July 18th for Charlie starts as a normal day. He works. You can see he lives in Fort Lauderdale. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with South Florida, so I'm going to give you a little bit of geography lesson. He lives in Fort Lauderdale. That day, he's working in 2 offices because he'd often work in 2 offices a day. He'd work in the morning at one place and the afternoon at another. So he's working in 2 offices. The first office he's working in, both of them actually, are in Jupiter, Florida. Now, if you're familiar with South Florida, Fort Lauderdale and Jupiter are not close. With South Florida traffic, in the morning, he was in the car for at least 2 hours. Now, he came home late that night, you're going to hear, so traffic was a little bit better, but it's probably still an hour to an hour and a half. Jupiter is north of Palm Beach. When I drive up here and I hit Jupiter, I know I'm about a third of the way here. That's a good way to look at it. If you live in Fort Lauderdale, when you hit Jupiter, you're 1/3 done. He's in the car, and he's talking on the phone. And you're going to see it. We're going to show you what the phone calls are about. He talks to his sister, talks to his mom, talks to his girlfriend. We'll talk to you about it. There are phone calls. You're going to see there are a lot of phone calls. And there are a lot of phone calls to his girlfriend, and there are a lot of phone calls to his mom. We're not going to deny that. And he works in these 2 offices, and at around 6 o'clock, you'll see a text message that he's about to start a very long surgery, a big procedure. By the way, the text messages throughout the day are normal. Just after 7 p.m., he gets a call from his mom. And he's told that Professor Markel has been shot. And he's shocked. He's upset. His first reaction is, Wendy and the boys are dead. He's supposed to have dinner originally with a friend that night. But earlier in the day, that changes. And he's supposed to have dinner with Katie. And you're going to hear that Katie and him had gotten in a fight a couple days earlier about dinners. You'll hear it. And what you'll learn is after he finds out what happened, tells Katie he doesn't want to do dinner. He leaves the office at around 8 o'clock in Jupiter. And you'll learn that Katie tells him she'll come to his house that night to comfort him. He shook up. Now, let me be clear. You're going to hear he wasn't close with Professor Markel. They weren't friends. They had nothing in common. But he shook up because someone he knew, the father of his nephews, had been shot. When Katie arrived that night, and you're going to learn more details of how she gets there, what she has to do to get there. It's not planned. You're going to see that. The state's going to put on that evidence. You're going to learn that she's scrambling to get a babysitter. You're going to learn, by the way, that Charlie had seen her for lunch the day before. So if it's a murder for hire, why didn't she get the money then? Puzzle pieces. You're going to learn that she gets there that night, sometime after 11. And when she gets there, she is frantic. She's upset. And he's scared because he's never seen her this way. And she sits him down, and she tells him something terrible has happened. She says that a friend of hers had shot Professor Markel. She tells him over and over that she had nothing to do with it. But these people, she was talking too much. And her friend and these people learned about the problems that his family was having with Professor Markel. They learned about the $1 million offer. And they got it in their minds to do this. As you can imagine, Charlie his life has just forever been altered. He asks, who are these people? She won't tell him. It's not safe for you to know. He's screaming at her. She won't tell him. Charlie had a guess. You will hear in detail what happened that night. You will learn that Charlie Adelson was told if he didn't pay within the next 48 hours, he or one of his family members would be next. You will learn that Katie repeatedly said that she had nothing to do with it and acted distraught. You will hear how she said that she would help him. You will learn about the initial payment. It wasn't $100,000. It was more than $100,000. He had took out every.
It was a dream to return.
I mean, I think we're kind of seeing his punchline. I mean, I guess if you have no defense, sometimes you have to grasp for it. Because, yeah, he's basically saying she happened to tell her gangbanger boyfriend about this guy in a big custody dispute. And
How rich the family is.
And how rich the family is. And he said, oh, I'll take care of it. I guess my issue is that may be your defense. Sometimes our defenses are kind of out there. But I think why you would throw that in an opening and give the prosecution their entire case to debunk it makes no sense to me. When you have some of these twists, that's when you reserve opening and you ask the state and their witnesses questions that kind of get you to where you want to go without letting them know where you're going. Because then you can wrap it up either because you can always do your opening once the state rests before you put on your evidence. I mean, you can refer your opening till later. And it allows you to kind of essentially sandbag them or surprise them. By throwing it all out up front, the prosecution gets to spend their entire case debunking his claims. I mean, they get to ask Wendy, who you said is a cooperating witness, or the woman.
Well, she was subpoenaed.
She was subpoenaed, but there's a lot of friendly subpoenas. If you're subpoenaed and you don't want to be there, you're not there. They get to ask her about these claims and say, well, were you threatening? Were you doing this? If you're going for the cliffhanger, you don't give the prosecution the cliffhanger in the opening so they can do it. I've always said when I train new attorneys, everyone wants their Matlock moment. You keep asking the people questions and they walk towards the edge of the cliff. And everyone always wants to ask that next question and have the person jump off the cliff and destroy their own case. In reality, they back up. And here, he basically was telling the prosecution what it's going to take to get to the edge of the cliff. And was he expecting the prosecution to jump their witnesses over the cliff instead of walk them back? I mean, there are certain things you don't telegraph. And if you have a defense like this, why would you tell them that at the beginning? Let the jury hear it later, because you're giving the prosecution the entire case to debunk and fight against your defense.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea. You said you can actually give an opening later.
Yeah, what happens is you're entitled to give an opening or you can reserve it. And if you reserve it, you can give it whenever the judge chooses to let you give it. You could ask to do it on day 2, day 3. Typically what would happen is if you were going to put on evidence, which a lot of times as the defense you don't want to, you would say after the state rests, now I choose to give my opening. And I'm going to tell you where I'm going to go with my evidence. So if you don't give an opening statement right there, you can give it later. You're absolutely allowed to give it before you put on your evidence. Whether the judge would let you give it in the middle of the state's evidence, probably not. They could, but probably not. But it's not uncommon to then give it, because the state gets to put on their summation before their evidence to say, here's what my evidence is going to show you. The defense gets that same right. If you're going to put on evidence, you may want to reserve closing before you put on your evidence so you can tell the jury where you're going to go with it. But you have the right to give your opening later.
Okay, great.
In this kind of situation, I absolutely would have given an opening later.
Okay, interesting. Well, I know you have to get going. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, I apologize for that. It's some things came up that hadn't been planned, but I enjoy this. And if you ever have another case or anything to talk about, I'm always happy to help. Normally, I'm more free than this. There's just, it's been a day. An emergency came up right before we talked that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much
Right.
for your time. I think some people want to continue watching this, so I guess we'll just say goodbye to you, and
Okay.
I'll keep playing it then.
Keep
Thank
playing it.
you.
And like I said, if you need anything else or have any other case you
Sure.
want me to comment on, I am absolutely happy to. I appreciate
Sounds
it.
great. Thank you so much for
All
your
right.
time. Good
Thank
luck with
you.
your case.
I
Okay.
appreciate it. Bye.
Bye. Okay, guys. Oh my gosh. Now I'm left here by myself trying to croak out some words. So let me get back and I'll change it to maybe 1.25 speed. Will that make people happy? Let's see. Oh, shoot. I already closed the window. So let me try to find it again. Let's see. I just did too much talking today. So. Okay, that just goes to show why most practicing attorneys have no time to do YouTube, because there's always something that comes up, and deadlines and emergencies. So let's see, deep dive true crime. So thank you to James, mentor lawyer, for giving permission for me to show his video. Okay, hold on. Let me try to find that video, because he has 434 videos that are public on this case. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Okay, I see.
To do with it, enacted.
Okay, I'm gonna slow it quite a bit. Well, we'll do it 1.25. Okay.
Distraught. You will hear how she said that she would help him. You will learn about the initial payment. It wasn't $100,000. It was more than $100,000. He took out everything he had in his safe. You're going to learn about that. The state doesn't know it. It was more money. But you're going to learn he didn't have $350,000. So he had to pay every month. They don't know about that either. Payments every month. Does that sound like a murder for hire? Or does that sound like extortion?
So ridiculous.
You're going to hear about these gifts. And you're going to learn that the gifts were just that. They were gifts. Because as time went on, he became more and more certain that Katie was not involved. He became more and more certain that she was helping him. And he wanted to keep her happy too, because he needed her. He needed her help. And you will hear that the payments changed a couple months after the night of the extortion. 2 crimes. You'll hear that the payments changed and that Katie was put on the books of the Adelson Institute. Paper trail. They created a paper trail. Puzzles don't fit. Pieces of the puzzle don't fit. And you'll hear that in order to put her on the books, despite Katie telling him the night of July 18, you can never talk about this with anyone. You can never talk on the phone about this. You can never talk about it in public. You can never talk about it anywhere, because if they find out, they will kill you and your family. If they think the police are coming to you to talk to you, they will kill you. Look at what they did to Professor Markell. But you will hear that he told someone. He had to. He told his mom. You'll learn that she was the bookkeeper for the Dental Institute. You'll learn why he had to tell her. You'll learn about those checks. They've never been able to understand, why are they so sequential? Why are they back and forth? You'll learn why. They talk about the bump in 2016. What I like to call is the second extortion. What they don't realize is that their undercover operation was an extortion on an extortion. They don't know it. It's not their fault. And we're going to go through the wires with you. We're going to go through Dolce Vita with you. And we're going to show you how they actually prove his innocence. We're going to show you how they are talking carefully. They're talking to him. He's talking about an extortion. They're happy if this bump is the police, because if it's the police, none of them are going to get killed. If it's a bad guy, they're in danger. If you do a murder with someone, the last person in the world you want this bump to be is the police, because it means they're onto you. Puzzle pieces. Not from the first layer, she says, but from the second layer. I got goosebumps when she said it. It's one of my favorite lines in the recording. Not from the first layer, the first extortion, but from the second layer. 20 months later is the bump. That's the second layer to Charlie Adelson at that point in time. You will also see, and what's going to be weird about this case, ladies and gentlemen, and you're going to start to see it today. Much of their case, I agree about. They're going to put witnesses up there. I'm not going to ask them one question. Some of their evidence is exactly the truth. It just doesn't prove a murder. The stapled money, it's his money. You will also see that Sigfredo Garcia was arrested on May 25, 2016. You will see that Luis Rivera was arrested on June 2nd, 2016. You will see that Catherine Magbanua was arrested on October 1, 2016. Guess who wasn't arrested? Charlie Adelson. He wasn't arrested for 6 more years. And what you're going to see is that they have the exact same evidence in 2016 against Charlie Adelson that they do today. The same liars. They talk about an enhanced Dolce Vita recording. You're going to get both recordings. You determine if you can hear anything better. See, the state's case against Charlie Adelson is a case of assumptions. It's a case of guesses. It was not brought until weeks before Katie Magbanua's trial. You can ask yourself why. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your attention. I want to ask for your patience in this case. A man's life is in your hands. He's innocent. Send him home. Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
So what do you think about this cliffhanger approach and about the so-called double extortion defense? Why is it even called a double extortion? Well, the defense claimed that Charles was extorted on July 18, 2014, and then again later, during the FBI's bump operation, he thought that he was being extorted again by the people who had extorted him the first time, maybe one of the co-conspirators that he was not in direct contact with. At least that's what he believed early on after the bump. It is my opinion, one that I expressed immediately after I heard the opening statement live in the courtroom, that Dan Rashbaum made a huge mistake in presenting this defense as a cliffhanger. That, to me, automatically took away any reasonable chance that the defense was a truthful one. In the end, the defense did not work out. I still fail to see what big advantage Daniel Rashbaum and his defense team expected to get from this surprise defense. I thought that perhaps there is evidence on the wiretap recordings that would disprove the defense, and that the prosecutors would not have had enough time to find it mid-trial. Maybe that was the strategy, and maybe that's still the case. Maybe we still haven't found this evidence that would disprove the defense. Regardless, it seems that Dan Rashbaum expected the prosecution to be caught off guard, and that the prosecution would not be able to adapt to this newly revealed defense. In the end, prosecutors Georgia Kappelman and Sarah Dugan did an excellent job and adapted quickly, and the double extortion defense fell totally flat.
Alrighty, so please subscribe if you haven't to Deep Dive True Crime, as well as Mentor Lawyer Justice Network. So I'm gonna take that off the screen. Yeah, I really can't talk for too long, so let me just flash up some comments or questions here. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just looking at Judge Everett's face in the background, and he was just like, probably thinking like, what is this tomfoolery? So I know good defense attorneys are required in society to hold the state accountable, but Charlie's direct examination was insane, spoon feeding. Okay. No, I don't think I'm taller than him, so I can't make fun of him. Sorry. Okay. Hi, Susan. Thank you for being here, everybody, for being so supportive. Rashi got a new house. Yeah. Well, every so often I check on Will Harper, and it's still not for sale. So I wonder if Janice is still there, or what are they doing with it? Is it empty? Do they plan on selling it? Or maybe Harvey and Wendy are too busy to deal with his house. So if Misha Janice is still there, hopefully she can do a drive-by sometime to give us a look. She had a great video where she actually went to open house on Tortugas Lane. So that was great to see. Let's see. Okay, we'd all look goofy trying to defend or advocate for a client as this. Yeah, that's true. That's what, I mean, we can't totally dog on attorneys because everybody is entitled to have a good, zealous defense. But as Daniel Meier pointed out, there were some things that he felt Rashbaum did strategically incorrectly. So let's see what else. Take too long to start from the beginning, so let's see. They destroyed many lives. Yep, definitely. Final days of Whole Food shopping sprees coming to an end. Yeah, I mean, they're still making so much money on the rental income, so they're not going broke. I'm sure they have so much in the, what do you call it, in their investments that they could probably just live off the dividends or interest or rental income. So, oh, that's funny. Charlie's face is the same color as the Prius. Another coincidence. Yeah. Oh, okay. So who called you? We would love Misha Janice to please go visit Will Harper. What is it? Is it 2518? Well, I'm sure you can just Google it, but we want to see if that house is being occupied, or does it look like weeds? Weeds are growing everywhere. Yeah, please please let me go. I'm so sorry. I was hoping Daniel could just be here and just keep talking so I wouldn't have to keep croaking along. So, okay, thank you. More recent footage. Can't wait to see. So please subscribe to Misha Janice. Would they give it to Brian Roman? Well, I mean, I think she just doesn't want to live there because she moved to North Carolina. So I'm sure they could give her the money though. Yeah. Okay. So Charlie's face, it's Silver Pine Mica. Deposition hearing. I don't think so. I mean, I don't practice criminal law or in Florida, but yeah, usually she doesn't have to be deposed because she doesn't even have to testify. So because of her Fifth Amendment right. So, okay, I think I better get going because then people are going to all complain and tell me how crappy I sound as usual. So I'm going to go get some more tea, just stop talking, maybe chew on some ginger or something. So thank you guys for caring. Still have my nice candle here in memory of Dan Markel. And I'm not sure what I'll do next week. Oh, Patty's Playhouse. She has graciously agreed to be on the show. So Patty can talk. She can talk for hours straight. So I'm looking forward to having Patty's Playhouse as the next guest. And I think that's supposed to be next Sunday, not this Sunday, but following week. So let's see. Oh, thank you. Thank you guys. Let me see. No way Donna can control her rage bait. Well, she sure put on this like phony act of being all jovial during her last court hearing on Monday. So maybe she'll put on another good performance. What if Wendy got on the stand? She's not going to anyway. Still have immunity. Well, it's only immunity in terms of, yeah, like what she says on the stand is not supposed to be used as evidence against her. So I think she would still have immunity in terms of just that statement. But luckily, in my opinion, they do have plenty of evidence against her. So they wouldn't need to have a real confession. Yeah. So thank you. Okay. Got to get going now and stop talking. So, yeah, she has a very strong vocal cord or vocal ability. I'm jealous of people who can talk like that because I used to take it for granted that if I wanted to talk, I could just open my mouth and start talking. So it kind of stinks to sort of become disabled in a way. Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Have a good evening then. Thanks for continuing to care about justice for Dan. Have a good night. Thank you.